There is a truth about narcissists that most people never really see, and once you see it, their behavior stops looking powerful in the same old way. On the surface, they can seem unshakable. They may look charming without effort, confident without doubt, and superior in a way that fills the whole room. But under that image, there is often a quiet suffering that never fully leaves them. Many people assume narcissists must be pleased with themselves. They think these people enjoy control, enjoy the damage they cause, and move through life untouched by guilt, fear, emptiness, or regret. But the deeper reality is much more complex. The narcissist is not always the untouchable person they appear to be. In many cases, they are among the most emotionally disturbed people you will ever encounter. Their pain is hidden so well that even the people closest to them may never name it for what it is. What you are about to hear opens a door into that hidden inner world. And once that door opens, it becomes harder to be impressed by the performance. It becomes harder to confuse noise for strength. If you want to understand human behavior at a deeper level, if you want to spot manipulation earlier, and if you want to see the emotional patterns behind the mask, stay with this all the way through. Because the next part changes everything. What looks like control from the outside can sometimes be panic on the inside. What looks like pride can sometimes be pain wearing expensive clothes. And when you understand that, the illusion starts to crack. The first hidden sign is easy to miss because it does not always show on the face. It sits in the center of everything they do. It is a deep and constant emptiness. Narcissists often look full of self-belief. They seem proud of who they are. They may act as if they are completely satisfied with themselves and fully sure of their importance. But inside, there is often a hollow place where a solid sense of self should have grown. This emptiness is not a passing mood. It is not just stress. It is not one bad week. It tends to stay with them almost all the time. They feel it in silence. They feel it when attention fades. They feel it when nobody is watching, praising, clapping, admiring, or reflecting back the image they want the world to confirm. And because that emptiness feels unbearable, they spend much of life trying to fill it from the outside. They chase attention because without it, they start to feel invisible. They seek status because it gives short relief from what lives inside them. They demand admiration because the moment it disappears, they are left alone with the void they work so hard to escape. This is why peace is often so difficult for them. Stillness feels dangerous. Solitude feels heavy. Quiet moments become mirrors, and mirrors can be brutal. You may notice how they create noise around themselves, how they talk endlessly, stir conflict, rush into new goals, new relationships, new audiences, new drama. What looks like nonstop energy may really be escape. And this is where it gets darker. They are not only running toward attention, they are also running away from themselves. The second sign is often mistaken for ambition, but beneath it there is a very different kind of suffering. It is their inability to feel satisfied for long. To other people, this can look like drive, high standards, or refusal to settle. It can seem like confidence mixed with hunger for more. But the truth underneath is painful. Many narcissists struggle to hold on to the feeling of fulfillment. The moment they get what they wanted, the excitement fades fast. The success loses color. The relationship that felt perfect suddenly feels disappointing. The person they once admired starts to look ordinary. The achievement that once seemed huge becomes strangely empty. This does not keep happening because life keeps failing them. It happens because their inner world has trouble holding real contentment. Lasting satisfaction usually grows out of security, emotional grounding, and some honest connection to the self. But the narcissist often lacks those foundations. So they live in a constant state of craving. More praise, more attention, more proof, more success, more signs that they matter. Yet even when they receive all of it, it rarely feels like enough. That is the hidden misery. From the outside, it looks like motivation. On the inside, it feels like endless hunger with no meal big enough to calm it. They reach goals and still feel empty. They enter relationships and still feel empty. They collect symbols of success and still feel empty. Instead of asking what is broken within, they often blame the outside world. They tell themselves the next win will finally do it, the next partner will fix it, the next admirer will complete them. But it never lasts. Stay with me because this is the trap. The wound is internal, and no amount of external praise can heal what the person refuses to face. The third sign goes deeper than most people realize, and it explains why even small criticism can create such big reactions. It is the exhausting burden of maintaining a false self. Every narcissist builds an image. That image is stronger than they feel, smarter than they feel, more attractive, more successful, more special, more important. It is not just a role they play now and then. Over time, it becomes a full psychological structure, and protecting that structure takes enormous effort. Imagine waking up every day as if you are walking onto a stage. Imagine never feeling free to step out of character. Imagine always fearing that if people saw the real you, everything would collapse at once. That is the pressure many narcissists live under. They constantly watch how others respond to them. They study impressions, they replay conversations, they scan for signs of disrespect, rejection, or doubt. They need to know how they are being seen because their stability depends on it. They cannot allow themselves to be deeply known because being deeply known means being deeply seen, and being deeply seen means exposing parts of themselves they have spent years trying to bury. This creates real exhaustion. Sometimes it comes out as anger, sometimes as coldness, sometimes as sudden control, emotional withdrawal, or sharp irritation over something that seems very small. People often ask why someone who appears so powerful can become so upset over one comment, one correction, one refusal to admire them. The answer is simple and devastating. They are not only defending pride, they are defending the structure that keeps them from falling apart. Their arrogance is not always proof that they feel superior. Often it is proof that feeling ordinary is unbearable. And the next part matters even more, because once that false self is threatened, the reaction can become extreme. That is why narcissistic injury can feel so explosive. When someone points out a flaw, questions the image, sets a boundary, or stops giving admiration, it does not land as a small problem. It can feel like a direct threat to survival. For the narcissist, the false self is not just a mask anymore. It becomes the only identity they know how to live through. So when that identity is challenged, the threat feels total. What looks like overreaction from the outside may actually be panic at the edge of collapse. This is why they may become cruel over something minor, defensive over something true, or furious when another person simply refuses to play along. The reaction is not always about the moment itself. It is about what the moment touches. It touches shame. It touches fear. It touches the terrifying possibility that the image is cracking and the real self underneath is weaker than they can bear to admit. When you understand that, certain behaviors begin to make more sense. Not in a way that excuses them, but in a way that removes the mystery. Their grand behavior is often less about confidence and more about protection. Their control is often less about strength and more about fear. And the more fragile the inside becomes, the harder they may push the outside performance. This is why some narcissists seem calm until one tiny thing exposes them, then suddenly everything changes. The charm disappears. The warmth disappears, the polished mask slips, and what comes out may shock the people around them. If you have ever seen that sudden shift and wondered how it happened so fast, this is part of the answer. It was never as stable as it looked. The image was holding more weight than it could carry, and once pressure hits the weak point, the whole performance can become desperate very quickly. The fourth sign is a fear they almost never admit even to themselves, but it follows them everywhere. It is the fear of becoming irrelevant. Beneath the confidence, the self-importance, and the constant need to stand above others, there is often a powerful terror of being forgotten, overlooked, replaced, or simply treated as ordinary. For many people, being average may feel uncomfortable. For the narcissist, it can feel unbearable. Their identity depends on feeling special, chosen, admired, exceptional, and above the crowd. So the idea of becoming unremarkable does not feel like a small insult. It feels like emotional death. This helps explain why they struggle when they are no longer the center of attention. It helps explain why another person's praise can feel like their own loss, why someone else's success can stir envy instead of joy, and why celebrating others may feel strangely difficult for them. To a healthy person, another person's achievement is just that, another person's achievement. But for the narcissist, it can feel like proof that they are fading. Every compliment given to someone else can feel like one taken away from them. Every rising star can feel like a shadow falling over their own value. This fear can grow even stronger with age. As time moves on, many of the things they once used for validation begin to shift. Beauty changes, attention moves, social influence becomes less secure. power can weaken. The admiration that once came easily may start flowing toward younger, fresher, more energetic people. And this is where the hidden pain sharpens. The very sources that once helped them hold the image together begin to slip from their grasp. If they never built a real inner foundation, they have very little to stand on when that external light begins to dim. That is why some narcissists become harsher, more suspicious, more controlling, or more bitter as they get older. From the outside, it may look like simple meanness or growing rigidity, but underneath, there may be fear rising fast. They may sense that admiration is harder to get now. The world is not responding the way it once did. The attention they depended on feels less dependable. And because they built so much of themselves on external validation, they are left with almost nothing solid to lean on. They watch younger people rise and feel panic instead of pride. They see influence shifting and feel insult instead of acceptance. They notice that the room no longer bends toward them as easily, and what others experience as a natural part of life, they experience as a personal threat. Under all of that sits the same terrible belief that has been following them for years. If I am not extraordinary, then I am nothing. That belief is not loud all the time, but it is powerful enough to shape behavior again and again. It can fuel envy. It can fuel sabotage. It can fuel endless comparison and hidden rage. And it explains why losing status, losing beauty, losing influence, or even losing social attention can hit them with unusual force. What another person might call change, they may experience as erasure. And when the fear of erasure takes over, they often do not soften. They harden, they grip tighter, they control more, they attack faster. They try to force the world to reflect back the image they can no longer hold naturally. Keep listening, because the deepest sign is still ahead, and it may be the saddest one of all. It reveals what they may want most, yet struggle hardest to receive. The fifth sign reaches the central wound at the core of the narcissistic personality. It is the inability to experience true emotional intimacy. Many narcissists do have relationships. They may have partners, families, loyal friends, followers, supporters, admirers, or people who stay close for years. From the outside, it may seem like they are surrounded by connection. But being surrounded by people is not the same as being emotionally close to them. Real intimacy asks for something very hard. It asks for vulnerability. It asks for trust. It asks for the courage to reveal fear, insecurity, weakness, confusion, and emotional need. For the narcissist, that can feel almost impossible. Letting another person see those hidden places feels dangerous. It feels exposing. It feels humiliating. So they keep those places locked away. They may share facts. They may share stories. They may share opinions and experiences. But the deepest parts of themselves remain behind heavy defenses. As a result, many of them live in a state of emotional isolation. Even when people love them, the loneliness remains. Even when they are admired, the loneliness remains. Even when they are surrounded by attention, the loneliness remains. And this is a different kind of loneliness, the kind attention cannot fix. It is the kind no applause can touch. It is the kind that survives inside a crowded room. Again and again, they search for connection through the wrong doors. They seek control. They seek dependence. They seek admiration. They seek power over other people's feelings. But they often avoid the one thing that creates real closeness, which is honest, emotional openness. That is the tragedy. What they truly need may be the very thing their defenses teach them to fear. And when a person fears the medicine, the wound stays open much longer than anyone around them can see. Because of this, relationships often leave them even emptier than before. They may mistake admiration for love, control for closeness, possession for partnership, and loyalty for intimacy. But those are not the same things, and eventually the difference starts to hurt. Real love requires being seen. It requires being known. It requires allowing another person to witness the messy human parts, the fear, the shame, the flaws, the unmet needs. For the narcissist, this kind of exposure can feel unbearable. Instead of safety, vulnerability feels like danger. Instead of closeness, openness feels like humiliation. So they stay just outside the very connection they hunger for. They reach toward intimacy with one hand while pushing it away with the other. They may want love deeply, yet they may protect themselves from it at the exact same time. When those relationships fail, they often blame the people around them. They blame partners, friends, family, timing, life, bad luck, disloyalty, weakness in others. Rarely do they stop and ask why the same pattern follows them from one bond to the next. The source of the pain is not always in the people they choose. Very often it lives in the emotional barrier they carry inside, like a locked door they cannot bear to open. And if that door stays shut, no amount of admiration can create the closeness they want. This understanding does not erase the harm they may cause. It does not remove accountability, but it does expose the suffering beneath the performance. It helps you see that what looks polished, powerful, and superior on the surface may actually be fragile, lonely, and deeply defended underneath. Once you see that clearly, their emotional hold over you can begin to weaken. The illusion starts to lose power. The fear they once created begins to fade. When that illusion fades, you start seeing them less as giants and more as wounded people trapped inside a structure they built to survive. Not a god, not an unbeatable force, not some mysterious creature beyond human pain. Just a person who became lost inside a false version of self and then spent years protecting it at any cost. And when that structure begins to break, the results can be severe. When admiration disappears, when rejection hits, when relationships end, when failures become impossible to deny, when the audience leaves and the mask stops working, something raw begins to come up from underneath. What appears is not always strength. Often, it is collapse. It may look like depression they do not understand, rage they cannot control, shame they cannot face, or grief for the person they might have become if they had ever allowed themselves to be real. This is why narcissistic collapse can be one of the most intense psychological experiences a person can go through. It is not just disappointment. It is not just a bruised ego. It is the breakdown of the identity they have spent a lifetime defending. Everything they use to define themselves starts losing power at once. The praise feels weaker. The image feels unstable. The old tricks stop working. And suddenly, they are face to face with the very feelings they have been running from for years. This part is important, so do not miss it. The pain they fear most is often the pain that was waiting underneath the performance all along. When the false self cracks, they do not simply lose status. They lose the shield that kept deeper emotional truths out of sight. And those truths can come rushing in with brutal force. The deepest tragedy is that the thing they run from may be the very thing that could begin to heal them. What they avoid is not some terrible monster. It is the frightening but normal reality of being an imperfect human being, a person with flaws, a person with fears, a person with emotional needs, a person who does not need to be extraordinary in order to be worthy of care and love. But many narcissists spend their lives avoiding that truth. The more they run from it, the more trapped they become. The more fiercely they defend the false self, the farther they move from the real one. And the longer that distance stays in place, the more expensive it becomes. This is why understanding narcissism at a deeper level can be so valuable. It offers clarity where there was confusion. It offers perspective where there was emotional fog. It helps explain behavior that otherwise feels shocking, contradictory, or impossible to decode. Awareness lets you see through manipulation more quickly. Understanding helps you respond with more wisdom and less fear. And both can protect you from getting pulled into unhealthy emotional patterns that slowly drain your life. The next time you meet someone whose confidence feels too polished, whose superiority feels rehearsed, or whose need for admiration seems endless, look below the surface. Remember the emptiness they cannot fill. Remember the dissatisfaction they cannot escape. Remember the exhausting performance they feel forced to maintain. Remember the fear of becoming irrelevant. Remember the intimacy they may want but struggle to accept. And remember this simple truth. What appears powerful from the outside may be covering deep vulnerability within. Once you really understand that, it becomes harder to be fooled by appearances. And maybe that is the most important shift of all. The greatest tragedy of the narcissist is not only the pain they create in other people, though that pain can be very serious and very real. There is another tragedy that often goes unseen. They spend years chasing an image that was never fully real. They protect a version of themselves built on fear instead of authenticity. They pour huge amounts of energy into defending an identity that cannot truly love, rest, or feel safe because it was never rooted in honesty. And while doing that, they often miss the one thing that might have changed everything. The courage to be seen as they truly are. Not perfect, not above everyone, not untouchable, just human. If this helped explain something you have lived through, then hold on to the clarity it gives you. You do not need to romanticize their pain. You do not need to excuse their behavior. But you also do not need to stay hypnotized by the mask. Once you understand the suffering hidden underneath, the performance stops looking so powerful. The control starts looking smaller, the mystery starts falling apart, and that can help you step back, think clearly, and protect your own peace. Because in the end, the loudest confidence is not always strength. The brightest image is not always truth, and the person who seems most certain of their greatness may be fighting a silent battle with emptiness, fear, shame, and loneliness every single day. That is what makes the story so sad, and that is what makes seeing it clearly so important.